It took Scott some time to come to terms with Laurendeau's view of the need for two unilingualisms. Which was a view that had been adopted and explained by one of the researchers, William Mackey. In his journal, he wrote, "In regard to this idea of promoting unilingualism, I confess that perhaps lacking French logic, I could not see how a commission appointed to promote bilingualism could end up by favoring the promotion of unilingualism. Gradually it dawned on me, and I think on the others, that what Mackey meant..."
If we were indeed witnessing such a thing as a strong degree of unilingualism in a bilingual country for each language, which we are not, as one segment of this country is not bilingual, then this paradigm Mr. Fraser exploits may very well be acceptable. I use the term may very well be acceptable because it is not what the reality truly is, and thus cannot be judged as such. The present-day truth concerning this matter is actually more like this: a strong degree of unilingualism by Group B, while at the same time Group A is having bilingualism forced upon them. Mr. Fraser, like many of us over 40 in Canada, has no doubt lived through and witnessed the linguistic reality of the last 35-40 years in this country. Therefore, I must view his failure to reconcile the difference between the tattered concepts of which he quotes from and the actual reality we are facing in this country with a healthy degree of contempt. What's more, when one considers the fact that the group forcing the bilingualism also happens to be the group in the minority numbers, we can quite readily recognize how this can and does lend itself to a great deal of resentment by the majority that is having bilingualism forced upon them. And lastly, when Mr. Fraser quotes researcher William Mackey as having said,
"Unless there is a strong degree of unilingualism in the bilingual country for each language,"
this quote makes it a must that I take a moment to point out that one of the so-called groups is not playing by the same set of rules and does not consider themselves as being part of this so-called bilingual country. Therefore, that reality in and of itself precludes Mr. Laurendeau and by extension Mr. Mackay's entire aforementioned thesis altogether. It's no wonder Mr. Scott took some time to come to terms with Mr. Laurendeau's view of two unilingualisms. Perhaps without realizing it, Mr. Scott's confession of lacking French logic was simply the customary disadvantage of not understanding that this so-called French logic was actually just a well-disguised French dream of future domination of a unilingual French Canada. And it seems that many are on board with making that French dream a reality.
Notre petit collège donnait ses cours en français le matin et en anglais l'après-midi. Déjà, le français occupait la première place.
Si on n'impose pas une langue commune, on va mourir. Le bilinguisme pour les francophones, c'est la mort.
Whether or not to have French first on signs, etc. outside of Quebec is something that is debatable. But Mr. Rock touting French first as a form of victory for the French side, that's quite another thing, and very telling. Whether French is first, on top, or dominant may very well not be important to you and I, but culturally, to the French, being first, on top, and in a dominant position denotes power and control. And one quick peek at what is going on in Quebec right now, with regard to where the English language can, or cannot be found, if at all, clearly shows how important this kind of thing is to them.
One would eventually dominate and assimilate the other.